Hi, Karan.
Hi Vishwanath, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Batao, what's happening? How are you guys?
All good. Fantastic. Thanks, Karan. Thanks for making time.
No, no.
Over the last couple of months, you've probably been full-time public speaker and part-time businessman. So this must
Actually,
be
no, I'm not doing too much. Yeah.
all right. Glad you think so.
Uh,
Quick background about this group and who we are. So, this is
yes,
the IIT IIM community of UK. Nothing
excellent.
official about this, just an informal gathering that we started last year. There is Prakash
Okay.
Singh on this group, so he was sort of the driving force behind this. The idea was just as how you believe education should be boundaryless. We thought IITs and IIMs should be boundaryless, so we just got everybody together in a group here, just to
Okay.
celebrate our collaboration in the UK and drive it forward. So that's really this community, and
Got
hopefully
it.
we'll have more people joining in soon. The background to this conversation, obviously, over the last couple of months, there's been a lot of interest in the White Hat Byju's deal. But having
Hmm.
looked at your profile and having been connected to you for a number of years now, I do find your past quite interesting and fascinating as well. So when people speak about this being an 18-month journey or fast-paced growth being rewarded and so on, I get that sense it's probably not just the 18 months that got it there. There's probably a lot from your previous past life and history that adds there as well. So that's really what we wanted to explore here in the time you've
Sure.
got with us.
Yeah, yeah.
So Karan, firstly, what I wanted to get started with is this is a standard cliched question. If you were to attend an interview, a job interview today, and somebody asked you, somebody who knew nothing about you, asked you to tell them about yourself, what would you say? I mean, there's just so much.
What I would say is that there've been two kind of parallel paths in my life that have been going on, where I kind of followed a reasonably conventional corporate career,
Okay.
but then on the parallel side, I was doing very very creative experimentative stuff. So I was writing novels, and I was traveling a lot. I did yoga for a long time, a yoga for a year. Like, so I've taken a lot of sabbaticals in the middle to pursue my creative interests.
Sure.
And then I think over the last few years, I think those paths have started to come together well,
Okay.
right? So like when I was the CEO of this, like all of the paths started to come together. When I launched my first novel outside India, it was very heavily marketed, right? Random House published it, but I marketed
Yeah.
very heavily because I knew that world well.
Yeah.
Then when I was in Discovery in India, I was very creative in terms of launching channels and stuff. Then in the startup, I think again, the act of writing a novel from scratch,
Yeah.
it gives you the kind of the confidence that you can turn an idea into something significant from scratch. And then I used obviously my business, whatever learnings I had to drive it. So I think the kind of the parallel paths of like having a reasonably conventional analytical career
Yeah.
and kind of a pretty experimentative creative side, I
Sure.
was able to give pretty much full I was able to do reasonably full justice, at least to my capability on both sides.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now that sounds quite logical and makes sense when you
Yeah.
look at it in hindsight. But now to make some of the moves you did back in your career and
Yeah.
when you were in your prime, really, how did you get the confidence to take sabbaticals, breaks, write books, all of that? It feels like for somebody who was,
Yeah, I think so for those who are you young enough, I think this is quite like hopefully should be reasonably helpful. I think the first sleep is very tough, right? The first sleep is very tough because there is self doubt and there's the doubt of all the others around you that you have to take into account. So when I left my job for the first time, I was 28 or 29, maybe 28. It was in 2008, right? So I was 29 probably, and I left my job with Procter and Gamble, and I'd done it only to travel, right? I decided to backpack across South America and Eastern Europe and stuff, right? So I took a backpack and left, right? So obviously there was the noise of people around, right? That instead of getting married at age 30 or whatever, I was just like backpacking. And then there's the self doubt also on whether I would find a job or not.
yeah,
So the first sleep is very hard.
yeah,
After you take the first sleep, depending on the outcome, subsequent leaps become easier and easier and easier, right? Because you've done that once.
sure,
So now when I came back though from the first sleep, I lived my worst case outcome, which in a sense, in retrospect, was wonderful, right? Because in that time though, I came back, I left the US on January 2008. I really backpacked through Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, went from Brazil to Europe, then backpacked through Eastern Europe, right? I came back at the end of 9 months,
hmm,
around September of 2008, on the same month that Lehman Brothers collapsed in the
all
US.
right,
2000 was very bad financial crisis, right?
right, of
And
course,
and to be honest, I'd spent all my money in the traveling. I came back and I was sleeping on my sister's couch. I didn't have a job. I was trying to find a job in the US in a very tough market. So I was at 30, I was like living the kind of the worst case dream out of an IIT. I am kind of for a typical IIM person, right? That I was basically jobless and and no family, jobless, sleeping on my sister's couch. And that was pretty hard, right? Because obviously that's the worst case that you would expect after a leap.
Yeah.
But who are you? In 2-3 months, I found a job with BCG, right? And then I rebuilt myself again. So I think I started to get the confidence that, look, you can figure it out, right? Then after that, subsequently, when I took the second leap, it was hard because I had my wife then, and so the noise now doubled, right? My family, my wife's family, she's American, but still, I was age, I think 34, 35, again, like at the marker age, right? Where people start to have kids and stuff. Yeah. Again, I was unmarried, American girlfriend, and I was taking off to do yoga for a year, right? But then I was like, you have to ignore all this and do what you have to do. I did that. Then I started to form a different conclusion, right? After I came back, I did very well in my career, right? And I started to form this conclusion that if you're choosing very dramatic human growth, then over the long term, the world gives you credit for that, right? The world will reward the output that comes out of a dramatic input change, your personality change.
Sure.
Then I got very confident, right? After that, subsequently, I left to write a novel for a year longer. Then I left to do a startup. In all of those, I was very confident that, look, systems are inefficient in the short run, but very efficient in the long run. So in the short run, I'll go through ups and downs. But in the long run, if I'm growing dramatically as a human being, as a person, as a personality, then it's going to reflect in my output. So after that, I was very comfortable, right? So I think by the 4th or 5th time that I left, I was like very confident that as long as I'm making it for the right decision, which is to really grow as a human in some way, whether that's for writing or for yoga or for really challenge my limits as a human, then I think that growth and personality will reflect in the output. Sure. And that, so by then I was very confident. Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. So in that sense then, is there a common denominator at all to everything you've done in the different parts of your career, or were they all playing different roles in shaping you as a complete professional?
No, I won't say there was much of a common denominator. I did just I went very deep into whatever I was interested in and very single-minded into that, right? So I was very interested in, so after my the first time I was very interested in backpacking and I wrote a novel, and then I came back, and then the second time I was my mom had passed away. She was very young. She was in her early 50s, right? Mm-hmm. I was very deep into the yoga, meditation, and nirvana, moksha, meaning of life. And so the next time I did it was purely, I was very comfortable with the idea that I would become a monk, right? It wasn't like some path. Right. I lived in for a year, right? Got very deep into that. So I don't think there is a mechanic there. The mechanic is really going very, very deep into what I was interested in without too much of a fear of consequence around that, because I was choosing things that I was very, that I thought would really, really help me grow as a human, right? That was probably what I decided to do. Similarly, in the last time, when I was with Discovery, I was the head of Discovery in India. I really felt that I was getting disconnected from tech, right? Building tech with my own hands, right? I wanted to build a tech product with my own hands, right? So I decided to do a tech startup. But there's no great method that I was following.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's really where I was getting to. Where is the clarity there?
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting to understand. And with the book writing aspects of your career and your journey, did you expect the sort of popularity you achieved when you wrote your first book?
Not the first book. After that, I would say there's been a diminishing popularity. So the first book did very well, and it was very unexpected. I wrote it very quickly.
Right.
Subsequently, the other books after that have been better, but they didn't receive that level of success, I would say. So in a way, no. I think by this phase now, I think you kind of start to feel that life is a bit like a slot machine, right? Where sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So I think at this phase, you start to kind of feel that life is a bit like a slot machine, right? Where you you don't know what the output is, right? You can just control the input. So my kind of general thesis of life is that I treat it like a slot machine, which is basically I play the slot with all my energy daily, with full 100% energy. And Sometimes that will lead to great output, and sometimes it will be a bust. But I just have to give my full energy to whatever I do, right? So I'm quite like detached from the output. I just keep giving all of my energy into whatever the input I'm putting in at any stage.
All right,
Yeah.
fantastic. No, that's very clear learning there, Karan. So from that journey, then dipping into White Hat Junior. So obviously we've already addressed the fact that there are no common denominators really. You go into anything
Right.
with full energy. So where did the idea start from? Because it's not something where you looked at somebody else, or it's not been a common industry phenomenon over the years. So how did you think or get the idea of saying kids can learn coding, and it'll mean something to them?
I read a lot, so I was reading about early childhood coding experiments in the US, right? And the one learning that was coming from them, which was quite profound for me, was that kids who code, right, they have this very fundamental psychological shift that happens in them, that they become creators, right? They start to think of themselves as people who will build things, like who will create things, right? And they start to think of life as a like as a playground of experimentation and creation, right? So I was very moved by that idea, because when I thought of my own kids, right, I felt that they should think of life like a playground of experimentation, creation, and not a binary series of rights and wrongs, right?
Right.
And it came from my own life, right? From the time I wrote my first novel, I was very profoundly experimentative, creative,
Sure.
and I wanted my kids to feel that very early. So that was how the idea of coding for kids kind of came to shape.
All right. Okay. Fantastic. And once you had that idea, obviously you were in your full time job in a high pressure, high profile job with Discovery back then. So what steps did you take to validate your thinking and really see if there was anything to it, or it was just one of fancy flights of thought?
No, I'm quite quick at execution. So I put together a landing page with a guy from Upwork.
Okay.
Right, coding for kids, very simple landing page with a guy from Upwork, and then I hired a teacher, right, like offline, and asked her to give a first set of classes. And then I just wanted to see if people would pay money. And people started to pay money, and I was like, that this is an idea that can turn into a business. Then I officially kind of resigned and gave my notice and set up the company, right? And with my background, I was able to pick up the seed funding of $1.3 million quite easily, right? Without having to have too much of more than that landing page, right, to show.
Sure. Okay, so that I think the key lesson there for a lot of startup entrepreneurs is to move fast and not really sit on the idea and think too much. And having looked at a few of your other interviews, that's the common theme that came out. Sorry, I'm just quickly noticing a question in the chat window. This is not a scripted event. We're just exchanging questions and answers. And I'm conscious of Karan's time as well. So after the next 10-15 minutes, we'll open up for audience questions as well. And for those
you can do that now. Yeah, anytime. Feel free. Questions.
So and equally, a number of you have raised questions when you registered for the event, so I've got those and I'll weave those in at the right points in time.
Okay.
So that's there as well. So in this then, there are a lot of people here on this group who are in early stages or various stages of startups and so on. So there is this whole thing around product market fit, and you very quickly said you tested it and went forward with growth on that. Are you able to uncover a bit more of detail around how you went about validating that your product was fit for the market? And
so that validation is never a one apocalyptic, like a cataclysmic event that now it's validated, right? Every stage you hit a certain. I knew enough that there'd be enough now to build a business, right? But how big would that business be? Those questions never end until a very large scale, right? Technically, I would argue that question right now, right? Although we are doing a couple of $100 million of revenue run rate sort of a thing, but is it going to be $200 million or 200 billion, right? These questions never end, right? In a way. So the product market fit is not like a one-time event. I think it's very easy to find out if there is initial appeal for the product by, as I said, I put a landing page. I got users to I hired a teacher to do a class. That was my model, right? And did the class, and people wanted to continue and pay for it. So that's how I knew that there would be some market to pay for it. Then I really kind of built the product in a much more structured, thoughtful way, and then with the funding, and then I built a team. So it's like in layers, right? It just keeps adding in layers.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. So you referred to building a team there. That's a core part of any startup experience for anybody, because especially in early stages of startup, you don't have the financial strength typically you'd like to have to go and place big bets there. So if you could help us understand your thinking around how you pulled the team together in early days and how it continues now, that will be useful for us.
Team in the early days is very hard, right? Because the founder has to recruit himself or herself very, very quickly, right? Which basically means the founder should be like spending 50-60% of the time hiring, right? Obviously, because hiring is the most important thing that you can do, and the team will basically make or break a startup, right? I mean, there is no. I mean, I did it the old-fashioned way because by then I was too senior, right, to have networks of the people that I was looking for. I was looking for young 20 tech people. None of my networks could truly help for that, right? Because all the people I knew were very senior.
Right.
So I did it the conventional way. I posted on LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs became the first source of applications, right? Now, what helped me was that I had a very credible background before that. So people wanted to work for me, right? So it became a little bit easier, I would say, by having my background to be able to get the people who I offered to. But it's never easy in a startup, never easy. People have to take cuts to come, and they really have to believe in the founder's vision.
Sure.
And the founder then, as a result, has to recruit directly himself or herself,
Sure.
and to infuse that same energy in someone else.
Sure. And in that sense, so what was the vision you sold to your initial seed team that came to join you?
No, I think in education it's a bit easy, right? So the whole that the kids would be creators, not consumers of technology,
right?
Appeal to people, right? And I was able to show that could turn into a business.
Sure.
And then obviously my credibility also helped a lot with that, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So in that sense, then, so it helps that you had a track record, so a lot of people flock to you. That helps. But equally,
I don't think people flock to me. You still have to sell a lot, right?
Sure.
Like even at my stage and my I guess bit of track record, I would say you still have to sell a fair amount.
Sure.
But for the most part, I would say comparatively easier.
Sure. So sorry, I didn't mean it in that way. But where I was getting to
no, you're right in saying, but yes.
I meant, but you were interviewing people who you didn't know from before, in most cases, I presume.
Of course, I mean, I like nobody actually. I anyway had a non-compete clause with Discovery for 18 months.
Right. Okay.
So the first person I've hired from my old team in Discovery, I've just hired right now, right after 18 months of running it.
Right. So in that sense, how did you decide whether somebody was good for your team or not when you were interviewing rank strangers for some roles?
When you interview a rank stranger, the only question that should be in your mind is this person far better than me at what they do?
Okay.
In what they do, right? So that I never have to look at their work, right? Are they driven and are they so better at me at what they do? So that's why I just would really go very deep into getting that feeling that they're better than me at what they do.
Okay. And just quickly looking at the question.
The office people have to be more detail oriented than me. The tech people have to be completely, obviously that's easy. They should know more code than me, but they should also have a clear product tech vision,
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. And I'm just quickly looking at the question by the side. So there is a thing about, so should you go for great talent if it's coming at a price you're not comfortable with?
So. Great talent at a price that you are comfortable with.
You're not comfortable with. So if somebody's really good, but they're charging a bomb, so do you go for
it? All depends on the. It's a question that depends a little bit on what skill sets are you trying to complement.
Sure.
So if you're a complete non-techie like me, and you're trying to complement the lack of a technical skill set, with a very, very good technical coder, then you should do whatever it takes.
Okay.
But if you're me and you're trying to hire an operations person, you know that you can subsidize that resource because you're good at that thing yourself.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. That ties towards building a team that complements itself and is a perfect product.
Correct.
So Mayank, thanks for the question. Hope you're happy with the answer there. So in early stages, the other decision you will have to make is about your business model. How are you going to make money and where is it coming from and so on. So what were the options you considered for this and how did you go about deciding?
I always wanted to go with subscription models because I feel like you should get cash quickly. Right. Cash is oxygen.
Yeah.
If you're reliant on somebody else's oxygen to breathe, then you're always at their mercy.
Sure.
Right. So I always wanted my own oxygen in a way, like I wanted cash. I wanted a cash flow positive company.
Right.
So I was very clear right from the beginning that I would choose a cash flow positive model.
Okay. All right. So it was an easier decision there for you.
Very easy.
So we spoke about team, pulling the right team together and so on. And you've got to build the product first, get it to the right place. So moving on to the pace at which you've grown, which has been sort of very highly spoken about. How did you establish that? So because it can't just be current thinking we've got to grow fast here. It's got to be the whole organization standing by that vision and working together on
Yeah.
that. So how did you establish that, and how have you sustained it all this while?
I mean, see, the founder's energy will drive the organization
Right.
very clearly, right? And if you're a 40-year-old founder, most of the people that you hire at the beginning will be in their early 20s, tech folks, etc. They'll be younger than you, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, if the founder doesn't have energy, you'll never be able to drive the team.
Sure.
In my case, I had this 10-10-6 principle right from the beginning, right? Where fashion out of Alibaba that we'll work right 10 to 10, 6 days a week, right? And we would only hire people who were ready to do a 10-10-6.
Right. Okay.
And I used to work myself 10-10-6, right? So I would be in office from 10 to 10, 6 days a week.
Right.
Right. And that's the principle for everybody, right? That's how we used to work.
Okay.
Right. And people who could not fit in there were exited out, right? Where they were either went out themselves or we exited them. But in one form or the other, it was a very workaholic culture right from the beginning.
Right.
And that really helped. I think it really helped because I think purely we just we worked a lot. And like I managed to replicate that over 3,000 people.
Right. Okay.
At the 10-10-6. I never went to 5 days a week working. After 18 months and like 3,000-4,000 people in the company, for the first time, we decided to do one Saturday off in a month, which also was a very big decision.
I'm sure
Right?
it was, yeah.
Decision which I didn't want to take, but now that the company is forming and becoming larger, and but we are not going to do more than that, right? I think I'm going to run an organization that works because see, startups, 90% of the chance they'll fail, right? 9% of the time they are going to give you the same returns as a high-paying job.
Mm-hmm.
And 1% of the time they'll give you the blockbuster kind of exit that you hear about.
Yeah.
If you're playing an odds of 1 out of 100 and you are trying to do it as a 9 to 5 or a Monday to Friday, it's not going to work. So I've always told my team that look, we are going to play the odds, right? And I'd set that expectation right from the beginning that this is how that we'll run it, right? It'll be complete extreme workaholism. Yeah.
Sure. So that is one, and I'm sure there will be people who might take offense to that, but it's delivered. It's delivered results that are unforeseen in the kind of benefits you've delivered to yourself and the team. Now, on this then, so one is about the quantity of time people put in, which is a base to build on. But how did you ensure that as the organization grew, and in all your interviews you talk about 100% growth month on month and so on, and having two very large geographies in the mix? How do you make sure your thinking cascades down to the last person in the team, especially when you must be recruiting quite a bit every week, every month?
Yeah, we're not. I don't think we're as good as we should be at that, actually.
Right.
I just do a monthly town hall.
Right.
And my kind of core belief system is that the middle management of the company has to be very strong.
Right. Okay.
The backbone of the company will be the middle management, the team leaders and the early directors. And that's going to be the middle management of the company. I even at this stage, I kind of I'm very involved in the promotions and cycles of the directors and the VPs and stuff because and I think our promise is very, very fast growth. So people can go from call center executive to VP within a year, right? Because the company is growing like that, right? And with that comes a fair amount of you need to be able to promote people who are very high performers, but also are able to run teams. But I think middle management is the backbone of a company.
Okay.
So as you scale, you have to build a very strong middle management layer,
right? Because
those people become the center of the organization, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's I think it's very useful for startups as well as large organizations alike. I think that's something for us to bear in mind. So when it comes to ensuring quality, because you're now offering a platform, you're reliant on having the right teachers and the right courses and so on and so forth, again at the pace at which you're growing. What is your approach towards ensuring quality of your service?
See, I think every startup will begin with people, then move to process, then move to product, right? So that's how you should follow the journey.
Right.
In the beginning, you'll do quality with people, right? So you'll put the right people at the task, and people will run that. Soon the scale becomes so big that people will falter.
Yeah.
And you need to have very, very strong data and processes and systems.
Sure.
And then basically soon all of those have to be productized, right? And built into tech. So that they become because the scale becomes too hard to manage without tech. So I think that's the journey, people, then process, then product.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Let me quickly look to the side in terms of questions. So
I have 8 minutes.
Sorry, I'm just looking at one which is talking
Yeah,
about,
yeah. So please let me know what is a tough question that I can answer.
yeah, so there's an interesting one about with a 72-hour work week. What are your yoga practices? Are you still in touch?
It's very important. I think the founder's energy is coming from their personal life choices. I meditate morning and night, like morning in the first thing in the morning and before I sleep in the night.
Right.
Very helpful because it gives me a very good sleep. Although I sleep less, 6.5 hours, but it's very deep.
Yeah.
I meditate in the morning. I do, I do my yoga a few days a week at least. So I think my diet is very healthy.
Sure.
So as a result of that, I think the energy levels are very high. That's a very under talked about and under leveraged part of a founder's success, right? Which is how are they building their energy? What is their energy source?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you referred to earlier, you've got to drive the organization, so you can never be
Correct.
short of
The
energy.
leader's energy will drive the organization. If the leader slacks, then the organization slacks.
Absolutely. There's another question around having co-founders. So have you ever felt the need of having one? So
Yeah, I would have loved to have one. Yeah. So the thing is, it's a great thing to have, especially since I was a complete non-tech person trying to build a tech company.
yeah,
Then basically if you're the only so I would have loved to have a tech founder, right? A tech co-founder,
right.
But that didn't I couldn't find one at the time I started the company. I chose speed and I executed fast.
Sure.
And then eventually found a great CTO over a period of time.
Okay. And if that was the case, then in that initial period when probably doubts were at their maximum, who did you have as your sounding boards? How did you test your
No,
thoughts?
not really. Nobody actually. Yeah. See, the thing is that you have to fight your own battles, right? Nobody see the VCs don't want to hear your battles and so, you gotta fight your own battles and present a good face to the organization and to the venture capitalists and stuff, right? And keep soldiering forward, right? So I didn't have a founder, but see, co-founders come with their own issues, right? Finding somebody who can match your pace, your energy, your vision is very hard. Again, it's not that easy anyway.
Sure.
But so I went without it. I think that's both plus and minus, I think. Yeah.
Sure. There's another question around your approach towards landing quickly and testing the market and carrying on. There might be some products and services which require regulatory. There might be regulatory hurdles and so on. So what would your advice be for people operating in such?
Very hard to know the particular use case, but there's always a way to test something.
Sure.
Unless you're talking about a medicine drug which takes years to research and trials, I think there's always a way to test something very, very, very quickly.
Sure. Okay. There's another question around how many incidences came where you had to refund for discontinuation. I suppose as you grew, when you had your subscriptions increasing, was there a proportion of people also falling out of the service? And
yes and no, because I think the founding journey is one of extreme patience in the beginning and extreme impatience after you hit the product market fit, if you will, right? So in the extreme patience in the beginning, I have this 50-50-50 kind of a rule, right? At least in my model, that my renewal rate should be 50%, which is 50% of people who took me should be renewing.
Right.
I have a net promoter score of 50, which basically means there is a consumer satisfaction score of 50.
Right.
And my gross margin in the business model should be at least 50, which means what I'm charging the customer versus what I'm paying the teacher, right? I should take 50% gross margin.
Right.
And I should optimize the model to reach that point before I hit scaling.
Sure.
So I for the first 7 months of the company, there were only 7 people in the company, right?
Right.
And I was just trying to get this model perfect. How much do you charge? How much do you charge the teacher? What is the gross margin is 50? Is your net promoter score customer satisfaction after getting the customer 50? And then when you scale, does your renewal rate hit 50? Right. So till then, they were only about, I would say we were doing 1 crore revenue a month.
Okay.
Right. Then when I hit that point, I went completely berserk.
Right.
Okay. Because after that, I knew that I had a winning model.
Right.
And then I just scaled like crazy. So every month I doubled, right? I went from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, 32 crores, 64 crores, 128. I would just keep doubling every month because I knew that the product and the business model was solid and I didn't have any hesitation in scaling at all.
All right. I think that's again another interesting or important learning that I personally took from your own journey, in that you spend the time initially to get the product right, and then when you're scaling, you're not really thinking about the product. You're
nothing at all. You're just thinking about business and operations and sales and like a heavy hardcore impatience in because startups are funny, right? when you're doing the product, everybody will tell you that nobody's going to buy it, right? Or it's too small an idea, or this or that, right?
Yeah.
Like for all the times I heard that coding for kids would be a very small category and niche category, and I kept hearing that all throughout, right? Which is good.
Yeah.
In that period, you should get the product right. There's a lot of naysayers then.
Right.
The moment you get the product right and business starts coming, all of those guys get into the market.
Sure.
Right? All of the naysayers are, and they are typically better funded.
Sure.
Right. So all of my competitors in India were far better funded than me, much longer in the business. So they all were looking at the business and wanting to get in. But by that time, I had gone crazy, scaling so fast that they not nobody entered the category at all, because we just took over the whole category.
All right, that's again an interesting point there. So with respect to scaling, then obviously right now I understand your growth in the US and here and in India has been sort of running in parallel. So did you start in both geographies together at the beginning, or when did that get in?
No, I started in India, and after it did well in India, I launched the US quite quickly. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
About 6-8 months into it being stabilizing in India.
All right, and in that sense, any rationale for the choice of US as a market as your
So there are only 3 markets, right? Unfortunately, UK is not one of them, but there are only 3 markets that really make a product successful eventually: India, US, and China. Right. China was out of bounds typically because every startup that goes to China is going to eventually fold. Mm-hmm. So it's India and US. India is high population, low GDP. US is high population, high GDP, right? Yeah. Every other market is a pale comparison next, right? Sure, Japan, UK, to these 3 mega markets, if you will, right? Absolutely. So I scaled in India to a large degree. We were doing about 60-70 crores in India. Yeah. And I thought that the next logical market would be the US, and cracking the US would make it very easy to crack it around the world.
Sure. Okay.
So
yeah. So on that whole scaling aspect, then looking at your marketing and sales and almost unapologetic growth you've had, it hasn't come easy to you in terms of efforts, but equally in terms of response from the market, you also have criticism being thrown at you, and so how do you look at that, and how do you?
I mean, the thing is that. I think creators in general, right? Whether it's a startup or writing a novel, and I've done this before, right? You just have to have a very strong sense of right and wrong morality yourself, and a thick skin, right? So my morality is, pretty strong and clear on what I'm doing, right? So I it's just noise for me. I mean, I don't care at all. Yeah. Like now everybody's like. The same people who said the category won't work are saying that we are overselling the category. So I don't even know what to, like if I keep swaying myself with every quick criticism I read, I mean, I'll probably be paralyzed into no action at all. So I don't care at all.
Yeah. And did that kind of maturity in thinking come over time, or have you been like that all along with your Yogi?
No, I think when you start building something, there's always going to be a lot of there's just going to be, so it's much harder to build and much easier to criticize, right? So obviously, the activity that is much easier to do gets more people doing it, and the activity that is harder to do gets lesser people doing it. So, so I think I'm just gonna keep building stuff, right, and try my best, right? I mean, in every form, I give it my best, right? So I think after that, I don't like pay too much credit to all these things.
So I mean, that links into a question another startup entrepreneur asked me the other day when he knew I was speaking to you. You're saying I'm in a place where I feel very lonely. I feel like there's nobody.
Who said that? Sorry?
Who's saying lonely? There's a person who's building a startup. He's an entrepreneur who's trying to build and scale. And he was saying he was feeling very lonely where he was. And he wasn't sure who his friends were, who he could confide in, and so on. So he wanted to know with the kind of both successes and otherwise you experienced, how do you manage your feeling of being lonely at the top?
See, I think there's this. Have you seen this movie called Straight Outta Compton, which is like a rap film for some people who've seen it, right? Yeah. So see, there are a lot of profound quotes and stuff, but this rapper guy, right? He says something, right? He says, "See, if it's not hard, it's soft. That's life, right? If things are not hard, right, they are pretty much soft and meaningless. Right. Okay. So if your life is not hard in some ways, right, then probably you are doing kind of soft stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
So the point is that, look, if it's not hard, it's soft, right? So this is hard. And this is it, right? There's no other way to say it, that it's really hard, right? The loneliness is hard, funding is hard, building a team is hard.
Absolutely.
Getting a business model is hard, scaling the business is hard.
Yeah.
all the criticism that comes your way when you're trying to do all of this stuff is hard to deal with.
Yeah.
And then exiting is very hard. But, if it's not hard, it's kind of soft, There's no point to it. Anyway. Right?
Yeah, and I'm getting used to seeing a yogi who also quotes straight out of comfort. So that's
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of what somebody else said. If you're not living on the edge, you're using up too much space. So,
Right.
right, when you entered the US market then, so another question we have is around what changes were required in the organization's DNA when you did that?
DNA the first thing is that the organization should be incredibly operationally disciplined
Right,
to run 24-hour shifts.
right,
Incredible operational discipline, right? So the workaholic and this culture was very critical that when we launched the US, right off the gate, we were able to run a tightly disciplined operation, right?
right.
And then basically, I would say, other than that, there were like a lot of customizations you had to make for the US. But in a way, the best thing is that if the leader is making the first 100 sales themselves, right? I did that in India. I was the first call center employee. I was the first sales employee. I'd done everything myself.
Right,
I did pretty much the same thing in the US at a much lower scale, but pretty much the same thing, right?
right.
And if the leader is like actively involved in the product, right, then they know how to customize it.
Sure. Okay.
I gotta go now. I have a hard stop, but if I can take one last question if there's something pressing on anybody's mind. Otherwise,
Yeah, so there were a few, but yeah, let me go with what I had. So you've got a bit more than loose change in your pocket now. So what is your outlook for the next few years? What do you want to do next in your life? What's your thinking?
I mean, I've been operating like without any restriction, even without having too much loose change, right? I've been doing exactly what I wanted to do. So I don't think anything changes that much. Maybe there is a mental security that was not there before.
Sure.
But it hadn't stopped me before from doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I'm also trying to figure out how like this will change. But in no ways my consumption hasn't increased. I'm quite bare in how I live. So in that way, like none of the parameters that have changed. I think there is a little bit of a mental assurance for sure.
Sure.
Because much of the time I left my jobs and stuff, I had kids and I was like leaving for, I would say, like writing full time and or pursuits that you knew would not lead to financial gains, right? So now I think I can do more of those without any restriction.
Sure.
But physically, I've been doing them anyway, so I don't think too much will change.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Karan. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Real great. I wanted to say hello. So great to see you guys.
It's a pleasure
Bye-bye.
speaking to you. Cheers then. Bye-bye. And thank you all. Thanks for joining. We have a LinkedIn group for those of you who want to remain in touch with us. So please do look for IIT IIM UK on LinkedIn. It's primarily for IIT IIM alumni based in the UK. And we have our annual event coming up in a couple of months. Prakash Singh and the rest of the team, we are pulling together a good show for first week of December. So please be in touch and let's meet at the next event. Thank you all.